Today, we are going to look at the most horrifying animal attacks ever recorded, from a security guard that faced a Siberian tiger in a storm to an influencer that got mauled by a bear. Let's dive straight in. It was September 15, 2016, in the rugged terrain of Angeles National Forest, California. The San Gabriel Mountains stretched endlessly under the golden hour light, their peaks casting long shadows across the chaparral-covered slopes. A narrow turnout along the winding mountain road provided visitors with sweeping views of the wilderness below, where dense brush and scattered boulders created perfect hiding spots for the region's most elusive predators. Anna Fox, a 26-year-old freelance wildlife photographer, had driven to this remote overlook with two hiking companions to capture the last light of day for a clear wildlife photograph. Known for her ambitious approach to capturing California's wildlife, Anna had built her reputation photographing deer and coyotes across the state's national forests. Her friends, both weekend hikers in their mid-20s, preferred the safety of established trails and maintained a more cautious attitude toward wildlife encounters. They had come to the overlook primarily for the scenic sunset views. While nearby trailheads had posted warnings about recent mountain lion activity, their turnout had no signs visible. The group's excitement peaked when they spotted a large mountain lion approximately 30 yards away, moving between the chaparral and granite outcroppings below the road. The mountain lion appeared intermittently through the thick brush, providing tantalizing glimpses that had Anna reaching for her camera equipment. Her companion suggested remaining safely inside their vehicle with the windows down for photography, but the windshield's reflection and angle made clear shots nearly impossible. Mountain lions are solitary ambush predators, most active at dawn and dusk. Adult males typically weigh 110 to 150 pounds and measure about 6.5 to 7.5 feet in total length. They rely on silent movement and short, powerful bursts at close range, using a rapid leap followed by a controlling bite to the neck to quickly incapacitate their prey. As the golden light began to fade, Anna made the fateful decision to exit the passenger side of the vehicle for an unobstructed photograph. She stepped onto the narrow shoulder, raising her camera toward where the mountain lion had last been visible. The animal had moved below the road grade, using the natural drainage and dense cover to mask its approach. Within moments of Anna leaving the vehicle, movement in the brush signaled the predator closing the distance along the concealed route. Witnesses only saw the initial movement in the brush before the lion lunged upward toward the road. Her companions had stayed inside the vehicle, and from their position, they only saw sudden movement in the brush before losing sight of her behind the road's slight drop-off. Investigators later determined, from drag marks and disturbed soil, that the animal closed the final distance from a concealed position before making contact from behind. Evidence indicated the encounter ended quickly. Marks on the ground and on her clothing indicated the lion made multiple contact attempts near her upper neck during the brief struggle. Her displaced camera equipment and the clawed tears in her jacket indicated the force of the initial contact and where the lion's claws struck her. Her neck injuries showed the lion secured a controlling bite early in the attack. The exact sequence inside the brush wasn't witnessed, but the injuries indicated a sustained neck bite consistent with typical mountain lion killing behavior. Drag marks showed the lion pulled her downslope into denser vegetation afterward, following its usual pattern of moving prey to covered ground before feeding. Her companions called 911 and dispatch notified park rangers and wildlife officers. They remained inside the vehicle as instructed until responders reached the turnout, then provided witness statements before being escorted out of the area for their safety. However, the remote location and approaching darkness made immediate rescue attempts impossible. Search teams located her remains 2 days later in dense cover, roughly 70 to 100 yards downslope, where the lion had dragged and cached the body under a layer of brush and debris, consistent with typical mountain lion feeding behavior. The incident prompted increased patrols in the area and additional warning signage advising visitors about mountain lion activity. Her family was notified by authorities, and the university later coordinated procedural support for student wildlife researchers following the case review. Wildlife officers tracked the lion confirmed to be responsible and removed it from the area, following standard state protocols for human attack incidents. Park officials also updated visitor guidance, encouraging groups of 3 or more to stay together when traveling through known high-risk zones. While mountain lions stalk California's wilderness, a more dangerous predator lurked behind reinforced barriers at a Texas sanctuary. A security guard would soon discover that even the most secure facilities can fail during violent storms. It was March 22, 2017, at a private big cat sanctuary in East Texas. The 50-acre facility housed dozens of rescued tigers and lions behind multiple security systems. That evening, a severe thunderstorm brought torrential rain and lightning strikes that would test every safety protocol the sanctuary had carefully developed over years of operation. Jude Walker, a 34-year-old night security guard, had maintained an impeccable safety record during his 3 years at the facility. A former military police officer, Jude applied methodical discipline to his civilian work that had earned him respect from colleagues and management alike. His insomnia made night shifts preferable, and he took pride in never missing scheduled rounds or safety checks. The sanctuary typically maintained a 3-person night crew, but 2 keepers had called in sick with flu, leaving only Jude and an on-call keeper monitoring backup generators as the storm intensified. Earlier communications reported tripped breakers and gate controllers requiring frequent reboots due to power surges affecting the entire electrical grid. The sanctuary housed Sasha, a massive male Siberian tiger rescued from a defunct circus operation. The animal had lived at the facility for 5 years, adapting well to structured routines and daily feeding schedules. However, severe weather made the big cats restless, and Sasha paced anxiously as thunder rolled across the Texas countryside. Siberian tigers are the largest living cat subspecies, with males reaching 10 feet long and weighing 500 to 580 pounds. These apex predators possess incredible strength, capable of dragging prey twice their weight over considerable distances. Their retractable claws and powerful canine teeth make them formidable hunters. Unlike other big cats that kill with throat bites, tigers employ brutal approaches, using massive paws to deliver devastating blows before inflicting multiple bite wounds. Their hunting instincts remain razor-sharp in captivity, triggered by sudden movements or perceived territorial threats. At 2 a.m., Jude began his logged perimeter inspection despite worsening conditions. High winds had brought down tree limbs, and power failures disabled security systems throughout the compound. Approaching the tiger enclosures, his flashlight revealed damage to the outer mesh fencing where an oak branch had bent the chain link material. Focused on assessing structural integrity, Jude knelt beside the fence with his back toward the enclosure area. The electronic lock securing Sasha's primary gate had suffered a critical failure during the storm. Post-incident inspection found the latch misaligned from storm-related damage, combined with an electrical failure in the locking mechanism, creating a small gap the tiger was able to push through. The agitated tiger's weight against the compromised gate caused the damaged latch to give way completely, allowing the predator to move from his inner enclosure into the buffer zone between barriers. What happened next can only be reconstructed from the physical evidence discovered the following morning. The scene revealed that Jude had been attacked from behind while examining fence damage. Forensic analysis of the site showed drag marks in the mud leading from the outer fence toward the enclosure, indicating the attack began at the fence line. The pattern of injuries told a devastating story. Deep parallel claw marks across Jude's shoulders and back suggested the initial strike came from behind. Severe lacerations on his forearms and hands indicated defensive attempts to protect himself. The most catastrophic wounds were concentrated on his neck and torso, consistent with the tiger's typical attack pattern. The medical examiner's report, completed days later, documented the full extent of the trauma. Multiple vertebrae had been crushed, major blood vessels severed, and vital organs damaged by the crushing force of the attack. The combination of massive blood loss, spinal trauma, and organ damage would have been rapidly fatal. Storm noise masked any sounds of the struggle, and Jude's body remained undiscovered until dawn, when the day shift arrived to find the horrific scene. The on-call keeper, working in a distant generator building, heard nothing over the thunder and equipment noise. The incident triggered a comprehensive investigation by state wildlife authorities and federal agencies overseeing exotic animal facilities. Sanctuary officials implemented immediate security upgrades and revised protocols requiring dual gate lock confirmation during severe weather conditions. Jude's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, which was settled out of court, while the facility faced temporary closure pending mandatory safety improvements. The incident prompted the facility to implement additional storm-related safety measures, and regional inspectors later recommended similar upgrades for other sanctuaries in the area. From controlled captive environments, our next story ventures into the Amazon rainforest, where a marine biologist would encounter a jaguar in its natural hunting grounds along Brazil's treacherous rivers. It was July 8, 2015, deep within the Amazon rainforest of Brazil, where a swollen tributary cut through dense jungle canopy. 3 days of relentless rainfall had transformed the waterway into a raging torrent, carrying debris downstream at dangerous speeds. The research station sat 650 feet from the riverbank, connected to study sites by narrow trails disappearing into impenetrable green walls. Willa Jensen, a 29-year-old marine biologist, had arrived 18 months earlier, documenting fish migration patterns during the rainy season. Her obsessive dedication to data collection earned academic recognition, but also concern from colleagues who worried about her tendency to prioritize research over safety. 2 teammates, a botanist and a field technician, had urged her to postpone the river crossing until water levels receded. Recent entries in the research log documented fresh jaguar tracks and scat near water sources, evidence of increased big cat activity, as flooding concentrated wildlife along remaining dry corridors. The morning presented Willa with a critical decision. Her spawning survey points lay across the swollen tributary, accessible only by crossing a fallen cecropia tree that stretched precariously over churning water. The massive trunk had fallen during recent storms and now served as the only bridge to her research site. Dawn conditions brought low visibility, while wildlife concentrated along river margins to drink and hunt. Jaguars represent the apex predator of South American rainforests, ranking as the 3rd largest cat species globally. These muscular hunters can weigh up to 250 pounds and measure 6 feet from nose to tail. Unlike other big cats that suffocate prey with throat bites, jaguars possess the strongest bite force of any feline, capable of crushing turtle shells and caiman skulls. Their preferred killing method involves a devastating bite directly through the skull or spine. Jaguars are exceptional swimmers, equally comfortable hunting on land or in water, making them uniquely dangerous near river systems. Their spotted coats provide perfect camouflage in dappled jungle light. Willa began her crossing at first light, stepping carefully onto the slippery bark surface. Her waterproof research pack, weighing 40 pounds, shifted her center of gravity as she navigated the treacherous bridge. Halfway across, floating debris struck the trunk, causing it to roll slightly and forcing her to crouch for stability. The motion disturbed the water below, catching the attention of a jaguar that had been moving along the riverbank within nearby cover. The jaguar moved through the riverside vegetation, using the heavy brush and rising water to stay concealed as it closed the distance from the bank. As she regained her footing and prepared to continue across, the jaguar positioned itself directly beneath the crossing point. The attack began when the jaguar surged from the riverbank, rising through the shallow water beside the fallen trunk. Its forelimbs locked onto her legs with sudden force, pulling her off the slick surface and into the torrent below. Razor-sharp claws sank deep into Willa's legs and lower torso as the jaguar forced her into the churning tributary. The 40-pound research pack immediately dragged her toward the bottom as the animal maintained its grip. Jaguars are strong swimmers, and the rising water gave the animal an advantage as it pulled Willa toward the muddy riverbank where it could maintain firmer footing. Her attempts to reach the surface were thwarted by the jaguar's weight and the pack's downward pull. Once in shallow water near the bank, the jaguar repositioned for its signature killing bite. The jaguar secured a crushing bite high on her back near the spine, consistent with the species' typical killing method. Later examination showed fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and extensive internal bleeding caused by the force of the bite. Forensic findings indicated severe internal trauma and rapid hemorrhaging, which would have caused loss of consciousness within moments. The jaguar maintained its crushing grip until all movement ceased, then dragged her body onto the muddy bank and into dense vegetation. Her teammates initiated search procedures when she failed to return by evening. Heavy rain and rising water levels delayed the effort, and the flooded terrain limited how far they could safely travel in the dark. At first light, station staff coordinated with local authorities, organizing a grid search along both sides of the tributary. Over the next 3 days, teams worked through dense vegetation and unstable riverbanks until they located her partially consumed remains beneath a cluster of fallen logs, where the jaguar had dragged and cached the body in accordance with typical feeding behavior. Brazilian wildlife authorities investigated the incident by interviewing staff and reviewing field logs, noting gaps in communication and safety planning during flood conditions. The station was required to strengthen its protocols, adding a mandatory buddy system, scheduled check-ins, and limits on solo fieldwork in areas with confirmed jaguar activity. While jaguars dominate South American waterways, the vast savannas of Africa harbor an even more formidable predator. Safari guide Bo Foster would soon discover that even experienced professionals can underestimate the coordinated hunting prowess of a lion pride. It was November 14, 2018, in the remote wilderness of Kalahari Transfrontier Park, Botswana, where endless stretches of red sand and scattered acacia trees created natural corridors for Africa's apex predators. The dry season had reached its harshest point, shrinking waterholes and drawing wildlife into narrow bands of nighttime activity. Bo Foster had chosen one of the park's designated but unfenced camping areas for a private family expedition, confident in his ability to manage any risks the bush presented. Bo, a 31-year-old adventure guide with more than a decade of experience, had led countless safari groups through southern Africa. His record was spotless, his clients praised him, and he was accustomed to navigating dangerous terrain with calm precision. That confidence, however, had grown into a quiet sense of invulnerability. His wife and 2 young children, joining him on such a remote trip for the first time, trusted his judgment completely. Earlier that afternoon, park staff conducted a routine briefing emphasizing strict rules: remain inside tents and vehicles after dark, avoid loud noises, and keep food sealed. Bo knew the rules by heart and had delivered the same warnings to tourists many times before, but familiarity had dulled their urgency. The Foster family set up their small camp in a clearing bordered by knee-high scrub. Their tent stood at the center, with their vehicle parked to one side. By dusk, the temperature dropped sharply, and the sounds of the Kalahari night took over. Distant roars, soft grunts, and the rhythmic calls of nocturnal birds. The landscape felt vast and alive, but deceptively calm. African lions are the only truly social big cats, forming family groups known as prides. Females, or lionesses, do most of the hunting and are capable of operating cooperatively when targeting herd animals. Yet most human encounters involve only 1 or 2 individuals acting independently. Lionesses can weigh nearly 300 to 400 pounds and rely on short, explosive bursts of speed and powerful forelimbs to subdue prey. Their hunting peaks at night, when darkness offers reliable cover. Around midnight, Bo woke to the faint sound of branches cracking somewhere beyond the tent. At first, he dismissed it as shifting wind or grazing antelope, but another heavier footstep followed. Then a slow brushing sound moved around the perimeter of the clearing. The wildlife of the Kalahari was always active after dark, but this pattern felt deliberate. A small group of 3 lionesses had been trailing migrating prey along a dry riverbed. Their route brought them near the campsite, where lingering scents, food, fire, and human presence caught their attention. The lionesses paused in the scrub, assessing. 2 remained deeper in the vegetation, while 1 drifted closer to investigate the movement she sensed from the tent. Inside, Bo listened. His instincts as a guide told him to stay put, but years of handling dangerous encounters gave him a misplaced confidence that he could read lion behavior well enough to scare it off. Not wanting to alarm his sleeping family, he unzipped the tent quietly and stepped outside into near total darkness, carrying only a small flashlight. The beam illuminated a lioness crouched roughly 20 feet away. She froze, eyes reflecting the narrow cone of light. The other 2 lionesses stayed farther back, unseen, but later confirmed by tracks left in the sand. The moment Bo stepped forward, the lioness reacted. She closed the distance in a short burst, striking with enough force to knock him off balance. Evidence later showed deep lacerations to his upper body from claws and crushing trauma at points of contact. The attack was fast, typical of a lioness responding to perceived threats at close range. Bo attempted to push himself upright, but the lioness maintained pressure, overpowering him within seconds. The injuries revealed a combination of clawing and biting consistent with a single lioness acting alone. The other 2 lionesses stayed along the vegetation line and did not engage physically. Tracks confirmed they maintained distance throughout the brief struggle. Nearby campers later reported hearing distress sounds, but were unsure of what occurred until morning. Inside the tent, Bo's family remained frozen in place, afraid to make noise or open the tent flap with lions still in the area. When the lioness released and moved away, she returned to the cover of the scrub, leaving the clearing silent again. Rangers responded at dawn after receiving radio reports from other campers who heard calls for help but could not safely approach during the night. They found Bo near the edge of the clearing, and tracks indicated the lioness had retreated shortly after the confrontation. The medical examiner documented extensive trauma consistent with a lion attack and rapid blood loss. The scene confirmed that only one lioness had made physical contact, while the other two remained on the perimeter. Following the incident, park staff reviewed nighttime safety procedures. They added mandatory radio check-ins for campers at unfenced sites and increased evening patrols during the dry season when wildlife movement peaks. The case became part of updated safari safety training, underscoring that even seasoned professionals can misjudge the unpredictability of nocturnal predators. From Africa's coordinated pack hunters, our final story moves to North America's mountain wilderness, where a survival instructor would face a different kind of predator entirely, one driven to desperation by winter's harsh grip on the Cascade Mountains. It was January 18, 2018, in the snow-covered Cascade Mountains of Washington state, where 3 feet of fresh powder and sub-zero temperatures had transformed the landscape into a frozen wasteland. The harsh winter had driven most wildlife to lower elevations, creating desperate competition for remaining food sources. Cleomatis had ventured into this unforgiving environment as part of an advanced winter survival training course. Cleomatis, a 28-year-old outdoor survival instructor, had built her reputation completing the most challenging wilderness exercises that others abandoned. Her competitive nature and former military background drove her to excel where others failed. She was participating in a week-long winter certification program, culminating in a solo 48-hour challenge, requiring participants to build a shelter and find food using only basic tools. The course leader remained at base camp, monitoring conditions and maintaining radio contact. During the briefing, she had mentioned increased cougar reports along lower elevation drainages, as severe winter had forced these predators to expand hunting territories. Cleo had been tracking rabbit trails through deep snow for hours, following intricate paths small mammals carved through the forest. The temperature had dropped to 5 degrees Fahrenheit, and she had been without food for 36 hours. Her plan involved setting wire snares at strategic locations along active rabbit runs. Cougars are North America's most adaptable big cats, surviving in diverse environments from rainforests to snow-covered mountains. These solitary hunters typically weigh between 80 and 200 pounds. Winter conditions create extreme stress as primary prey becomes scarce and competition intensifies. Desperate cougars take greater risks and hunt more aggressively, sometimes stalking prey for hours. Their strategy relies on stealth and patience, using natural cover before delivering devastating ambush attacks from behind, targeting the neck with suffocating bites. As Cleo knelt beside a fallen log, examining fresh rabbit droppings, a 110-pound female cougar was moving along the same trail system, gradually closing the distance as their paths converged. Tracks later indicated the cougar had been traveling through that drainage for several days, likely struggling to secure prey in the harsh winter conditions. Using thick forest cover and the uneven terrain, the animal stayed concealed while moving closer to Cleo's position. The dense pine forest provided excellent concealment, with snow-laden branches creating natural blinds that masked the cougar's approach. As Cleo focused on positioning her wire snare, the cougar closed to 30 feet, moving silently through deep snow behind thick tree trunks. The attack came without warning. The cougar emerged suddenly from behind a snow-covered pine and closed the short distance in a quick burst, landing on Cleo's upper back with enough force to knock her forward into the snow. The impact drove Cleo face first into deep, powdery snow, while the cougar's claws immediately sank through heavy winter clothing into the layers beneath. The impact knocked wind from Cleo's lungs and drove her face deep into loose snow, creating a life-threatening situation as powder filled her nose and mouth. Its claws tore through multiple layers of winter clothing, causing deep injuries along her upper back and shoulders. Unlike typical cougar attacks that rely on a precise neck bite, the cougar's weakened condition and winter stress made the encounter chaotic, resulting in multiple injuries as it tried to maintain its grip through her heavy winter layers. Cleo's defense attempts were hampered by her face-down position in deep snow and the cougar's weight pressing on her back. Each time she tried lifting her head to breathe, loose powder filled her airways, while the struggle caused additional injuries as the cat attempted to reposition and hold its grip in the deep snow. The combination of severe trauma from the attack, Restricted breathing from being pinned face down in deep snow and rapidly dropping body temperature caused her condition to deteriorate quickly. She lost consciousness within moments due to the injuries and restricted breathing, and she did not recover. When Cleo failed her scheduled radio check-ins, search teams deployed despite worsening weather conditions. Heavy snowfall slowed progress, and deep drifts limited visibility, forcing teams to move cautiously along drainage routes and known animal paths. After several days of searching, trackers followed Cougar prints through a series of tree wells and located her remains partially covered by branches and snow, consistent with typical caching behavior. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of winter survival protocols, resulting in GPS tracking requirements and frequent check-ins during solo exercises. Cleo's family established a foundation promoting enhanced wilderness safety measures. It was September 15, 2015, when tragedy struck in the remote northern Rockies backcountry of northern Montana, where climate shifts had devastated the region's natural food sources. An unusually warm summer followed by early frost had decimated berry crops across the drainage, while drought conditions reduced spawning fish populations to critically low levels. The area, typically rich with autumn feeding opportunities, now offered little sustenance for the wildlife that depended on seasonal abundance. Leighton Price, a 45-year-old freelance nature photographer, had established his camp 0.6 of a mile from a creek bend to document wildlife struggling through the harsh conditions. Price maintained a modest social media following of 4,200 subscribers, built through years of patient fieldwork capturing nature's seasonal cycles. His methodical approach and extensive backcountry experience had brought him to this particular drainage, where he hoped to photograph bears in their natural habitat during the challenging autumn season. The area showed disturbing signs of food scarcity. Scattered scat deposits contained unusual materials, bark fragments, roots, and even small stones, indicating desperate foraging behavior. Large tracks pressed deep into the soft soil showed erratic movement patterns, with claw marks gouged into tree bark at unusual heights where bears had searched for any available food source. A backcountry ranger had noted concerning reports of aggressive bear behavior in nearby areas, attributing it to the severe food shortage affecting the region. During autumn, grizzly bears typically consume up to 20,000 calories daily to prepare for hibernation. When natural food sources fail, these massive omnivores face a biological crisis. Starvation triggers increasingly desperate and unpredictable behavior as bears venture into unusual areas and take extraordinary risks to find sustenance. A malnourished bear's judgment becomes impaired, making them far more likely to view humans as either threats to scarce resources or potential food sources themselves. At first light, on September 15th, Price moved along a game trail toward the creek, carrying his camera equipment and telephoto lens. Through his viewfinder, he spotted a severely undernourished grizzly foraging desperately along the creek bank, its ribs visible beneath a dull, patchy coat that indicated months of inadequate nutrition. Price positioned himself behind a fallen log, approximately 50 yards from the water, adjusting his camera settings to capture the bear's struggle for survival. The emaciated bear, significantly under its expected autumn weight, had been moving along recent human scent corridors near campsites, a pattern consistent with extreme food stress and opportunistic scavenging. As Price focused his lens and began photographing, the starving animal detected his presence. Rather than fleeing as a healthy bear might, the malnourished grizzly's desperation overrode normal avoidance instincts. The starving bear immediately fixated on Price's location. Rather than the typical bluff charge of a well-fed bear defending territory, this was the focused approach of an animal driven by starvation. The bear struck Price with devastating force, despite its weakened state, its desperation lending ferocity to the attack. Patterns at the site indicate the struggle moved across approximately 30 feet of terrain. Drag marks suggest the assault persisted long enough to create multiple impact zones in the gravel and disturbed vegetation. Blood spatter patterns and disturbed ground cover extended from the initial contact point across the rocky creek bank. Deep gouges in the soil and overturned stones marked the path of the encounter. The bear's tracks, showing an unsteady gait, remained visible in the soft earth around the scene. Claw marks on nearby trees indicated the animal had lingered in the area, continuing its desperate search for resources even after the encounter. Price's body was discovered 2 days later when he failed to make his scheduled satellite check-in. The scene revealed the attacking bear's severely compromised condition through scat deposits containing bark, roots, and other non-nutritive materials scattered throughout the immediate area. Investigators determined that Price died from massive trauma and blood loss consistent with the sustained Grizzly attack, with injuries concentrated across the torso and head where the bear had made repeated contact. The incident highlighted how environmental factors can create dangerous conditions where starving wildlife becomes unpredictably aggressive, turning wildlife photography into a potentially fatal encounter. While Price met his fate in the mountain wilderness, hundreds of miles away, Amory Wild, an outdoor enthusiast, was preparing for what would become an equally tragic encounter. It was July 8, 2018, in the mixed conifer backcountry of a northern mountain park, where dense understory creates a maze of limited visibility along winding trail networks. The area experiences low visitation during midweek periods, leaving hikers isolated for hours at a time. Thick stands of Douglas fir and lodgepole pine tower overhead, while tangled brush crowds the narrow tread, creating conditions where wildlife encounters can occur suddenly. The trail system spans over 40 miles of interconnected loops, with some sections remaining unmaintained for months during peak wildlife activity periods. Amory Wild, 28, worked part-time at a local outdoor gear shop while building a modest adventure blog with 3,800 followers across social platforms. Known for organized route planning and mileage-focused content, Wild had selected this particular loop trail to create a comprehensive guide for fellow hikers. The route promised solitude and scenic diversity, exactly what Wild's audience sought in authentic wilderness experiences. Two experienced backpackers in their 30s had reported fresh bear sign on an adjacent spur trail just hours earlier, though this information never reached Wild due to poor cell coverage in the area. During the outbound segment, Wild documented extensive wildlife activity throughout the morning hours. Fresh tracks measuring over 5.5 inches across the forefoot were pressed deep into muddy sections of trail. Turned logs and scattered debris indicated recent foraging behavior along multiple sections. The evidence pointed to a large black bear actively using the corridor, though Wild continued the planned route without adjusting safety protocols or carrying adequate deterrents for the return journey. Wild had encountered a similar sign on previous solo trips without incident, which may have created a false sense of familiarity with the risks. Black bears typically avoid human contact through their acute senses of hearing and smell, often detecting humans from considerable distances and moving away before encounters occur. However, factors such as food scarcity, habitat pressure, or individual behavioral variations can occasionally lead to different responses. Adult male black bears, particularly during summer months when natural food sources may be limited, can exhibit more assertive behavior when defending resources or territory. These animals can weigh up to 400 pounds and possess surprising speed, capable of reaching 30 miles per hour in short bursts. Their powerful jaws and sharp claws are adaptations for foraging, climbing, and occasional intraspecies conflicts. On the return leg, Wild encountered the bear on a narrow section where brush pressed tight against the trail tread. Physical evidence at the scene indicated the bear had been foraging in berry patches just off the trail when the encounter occurred. Disturbed vegetation and scattered scat suggested the animal had been feeding in the immediate area for some time. The narrow trail configuration and thick brush limited escape routes for both human and bear. Scuffed trekking pole marks in the soil showed Wild had backed along the trail in short, staggered steps. The bear's tracks indicated it had initially moved parallel to the trail before turning toward Wild's position. Deep toe impressions in the soft earth marked where the animal's gait changed from walking to a more rapid approach. The initial contact came as a bite to Wild's thigh, the bear's teeth penetrating the femoral region. The force of the contact caused both to fall onto the downhill shoulder of the trail. Damage to major blood vessels in the leg resulted in rapid blood loss. The bear maintained contact, using its body weight against Wild on the slope. Subsequent injuries occurred to the lower torso and the shoulder area. Snapped carbon segments from trekking poles scattered across the ground indicated Wild's attempts at defense. Claw marks across clothing and pack straps, along with deep tissue damage, reflected the bear's natural defensive weapons during the struggle. The encounter continued until Wild's movements ceased. The primary cause of death was blood loss from femoral vessel damage, compounded by severe trauma to soft tissues. The bear's behavior during the incident appeared consistent with an animal responding to a perceived threat in a confined space rather than planned predation. After the encounter ended, the bear moved the body a short distance before departing the immediate area. Large black bear tracks were found throughout the encounter site, overlaying Wild's boot prints. Coarse black hair recovered from the surrounding brush confirmed species identification. Wilda's body was discovered the following morning, when a missed evening check-in prompted search efforts. The last GPS ping had registered mid-afternoon, providing investigators with a precise timeline. Wildlife officers immediately closed the trail system and initiated monitoring protocols for the area. The incident affected the local outdoor community, as fatal bear encounters remain statistically rare. Wild's family requested privacy while processing the sudden loss of their adventurous young relative. While Wild's tragic encounter shocked the hiking community, hundreds of miles away, wildlife researcher Della Reese was about to face an equally dangerous situation during what seemed like routine scientific work. It was October 3, 2019, along Alaska's remote coastal research territory, where salmon spawning channels carve through pristine wilderness. The area encompasses thousands of acres of temperate rainforest, with towering Sitka spruce and dense alder thickets creating natural corridors for wildlife movement. Gravel bars stretch along meandering creeks that serve as highways for migrating salmon and massive predators. Dr. Della Reese, 34, specialized in salmon population dynamics for a regional conservation organization. Her methodical approach and 5 years of field experience made her suited for solitary research work. Reese operated from a temporary field station positioned near major salmon-counting weirs, monitoring fish populations during peak migration periods. Her social media presence of 3,200 followers focused on educational content about marine ecosystems. Reese's research coincided with salmon spawning season, when thousands of fish crowd into shallow pools. This annual phenomenon transforms quiet waterways into feeding grounds that attract Alaska's most formidable predators. Her field notes documented increasing bear activity throughout the drainage system, with fresh tracks, scat deposits, and fish remains scattered along gravel bars. A regional field coordinator maintained regular radio contact with Reese, scheduling twice-daily check-ins. Recent station log entries recorded multiple bears using the same pools where Reese collected daily samples. Coastal brown bears represent the largest terrestrial carnivores in North America, with adult males exceeding 1,000 pounds. These massive omnivores gain hundreds of pounds during salmon runs to sustain themselves through winter hibernation. Their size is matched by surprising speed, capable of covering distances at 35 miles per hour. Equipped with 4-inch claws and bone-crushing jaws, coastal browns dominate any encounter. During salmon season, these bears focus intensely on high-calorie feeding opportunities. Prime fishing locations become areas where bears react strongly to unexpected disturbances. On October 3rd, Reese departed her field station carrying water sampling equipment. The half-mile route followed established game trails along the creek corridor. Dense alder stands provided excellent wildlife cover, creating blind spots where encounters could occur without warning. Reese reached the salmon pool and began routine data collection. Kneeling at the water's edge, she focused on counting fish and collecting samples while surrounded by splashing salmon sounds. The intensive work required sustained attention, leaving little opportunity for environmental awareness. A massive coastal brown bear had been fishing upstream throughout the morning. The animal moved downstream along the gravel bar system, following established patterns toward Reese's pool. Dense vegetation concealed the bear's approach until it rounded a creek bend, bringing predator and researcher into proximity at 30 feet. The thick alder cover, combined with the constant noise of salmon splashing, masked the sound of the bear's movement. The bear reacted immediately upon encountering the unexpected human presence. Startled by finding someone at its feeding location, the animal charged across the gravel bar. Reese looked up from her equipment as the bear reached her position, providing no opportunity for defensive measures. The initial impact struck Reese with tremendous force, the bear's massive shoulder driving into her torso and launching her backward into shallow water. The bear's jaws clamped down on her head and neck region. The crushing pressure of teeth designed to crack salmon bones caused immediate severe trauma to Reese's skull and upper spine. The bear maintained its grip while using body weight to press Reese into the creek bed. Powerful forelimbs with razor-sharp claws raked across her chest and abdomen, tearing through clothing and inflicting deep lacerations that exposed vital organs. The combination of crushing bite force and penetrating claw wounds created massive tissue damage. As the attack continued, Reese's position in shallow water became critical. Once incapacitated by head and spinal trauma, Reese's face-down position allowed creek water to enter her airway. The dual trauma of severe physical injuries and water inhalation proved rapidly fatal. Reese died from the combined effects of massive head trauma, spinal damage, and secondary drowning within minutes. The bear disengaged after the encounter, leaving clear evidence scattered across the gravel bar. Reese's research equipment lay throughout the impact zone, with her notebook showing entries made minutes before the attack. Reese's body was discovered the following day when she failed to make her scheduled radio check-in. Investigation revealed extensive bear activity throughout the sampling area, with tracks, scat deposits, and fish remains confirming regular use by large coastal browns. Hair samples recovered matched an adult male coastal brown bear. Wildlife management officials temporarily suspended research operations and implemented protocols requiring paired researchers in active bear habitat. The scientific community mourned the loss of a dedicated researcher whose work contributed significantly to salmon conservation efforts. As investigators concluded their work at the remote Alaskan research site, a completely different tragedy was already unfolding in the construction zones of British Columbia, where Canyon Ford would soon learn that wilderness predators recognize no boundaries between their domain and human industry. It was August 22, 2016, deep within British Columbia's interior wilderness, where ancient forests stretch across mountainous terrain, broken only by logging roads. The remote work site sat 15 miles from the nearest settlement, surrounded by dense stands of Douglas fir that had remained undisturbed for decades. Canyon Ford, 41, had spent 15 years operating heavy equipment for a mid-sized construction firm. His reputation for reliability made him the natural choice for solo operations in isolated locations. Ford had volunteered for this assignment, attracted by overtime compensation. He maintained an online presence with 3,500 followers who enjoyed his photographs of remote construction sites. The project involved constructing a logging access road through pristine forest that served as a wildlife corridor. Ford's morning safety log documented fresh bear tracks crossing the construction alignment, evidence of established travel routes that his work was intersecting. The area showed extensive wildlife activity, with claw marks on trees and well-worn game trails. Ford worked as part of a two-man crew with equipment operator David Morrison, 38, though their assignments kept them at different sections of the road project. Morrison operated a grader 2 miles down the access route, while Ford handled the initial clearing work. They maintained radio contact throughout the day, checking in every 2 hours as company protocol required. Recent wildlife advisories had warned construction crews about increased bear activity during the late summer feeding season. Grizzly bears rank among North America's most formidable predators, with adult males typically weighing 400 to 600 pounds, though exceptionally large individuals can exceed that range. These apex predators possess incredible strength and can run at speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour. During late summer, grizzlies enter hyperphagia, consuming up to 20,000 calories daily to prepare for winter hibernation. This biological drive makes them highly focused on food sources and more likely to react aggressively when surprised. Ford had been operating his bulldozer for hours, clearing the new road where several long-established game trails crossed the alignment. During an afternoon maintenance break, he shut down the engine and stepped out to inspect the blade. Morrison later noticed the sudden silence but assumed equipment issues when Ford missed a radio check. Meanwhile, a grizzly moving along its usual wildlife corridor entered the freshly cleared zone. Following scent trails through the disrupted forest edge, Ford knelt beside the bulldozer's blade, focused on inspecting the metal edges and unable to see the forest behind him. With the engine shut down, the area had grown quiet. A grizzly emerged from the tree line 40 feet away, its approach concealed until Ford looked up and saw the animal at close range. He pushed himself upright and began backing toward the cab, a sudden movement that triggered a defensive charge. The bear closed the distance almost immediately. The impact drove Ford forward across a loose soil and branches, his hands scraping exposed root as he tried to stabilize himself. The grizzly delivered rapid bites to his upper torso and shoulder, while its forelimbs raked across his clothing, leaving deep, parallel lacerations. Ford attempted short, defensive movements, shifting his weight, bracing against the blade, reaching toward the cab-mounted bear spray. But a forepaw strike knocked it from reach. The accumulating trauma quickly overwhelmed him, leaving a clear pattern of disturbed ground and scattered equipment. By late afternoon, Morrison had attempted 3 radio contacts with no response. Company policy required immediate investigation of missed communications in bear country. Morrison shut down his grader and drove toward Ford's worksite. Morrison arrived to find the bulldozer sitting idle. Ford's hard hat lay 20 feet from the machine, and Morrison immediately noticed disturbed ground around the work area. Ford lay near fallen trees with torn clothing, deep bite punctures and claw lacerations. Blood and disturbed ground across a wide area showed he had moved during the struggle. Morrison immediately radioed for emergency services and his supervisor, then secured the scene from his vehicle. The remote location meant emergency responders required nearly 2 hours to reach the site. Investigation revealed extensive bear sign throughout the work area, including well-worn trails that the road construction had intersected. Ford was confirmed deceased at the scene from multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a grizzly attack. Hair samples from the bulldozer's undercarriage confirmed an adult grizzly's involvement, and Ford's bear spray was found in the bulldozer cab, unused. The company immediately evacuated all crews from the forest district and brought in wildlife specialists to assess bear activity patterns. The incident prompted a complete overhaul of remote work protocols, requiring GPS tracking devices and emergency beacons for all equipment operators in predator habitat. Morrison struggled with survivor's guilt, questioning whether earlier intervention might have changed the outcome. The company provided counseling support, while Ford's family requested privacy during their grieving process. As wildlife officers worked to establish new safety corridors for construction crews, the episode shifts north to a remote island campsite in Manitoba. It was August 22, 2019, in the remote boreal forests of northern Manitoba, where backcountry canoe routes wind through interconnected lakes, accessible only by water. Late summer marked peak berry season and intensified wildlife movement as bears prepared for winter, heightening the potential for encounters with travelers. Beatrix Finch, 31, had recently shifted from agency work to freelance travel writing, maintaining a modest wilderness blog with 4,100 followers. Her companion, Mark Ferrer, 28, was a wildlife photographer familiar with northern ecosystems and trained extensively in polar bear protocols from previous work in Churchill. The pair selected a 3-day canoe loop passing through pristine boreal habitat known for late summer bear activity. Local outfitters required strict Arctic safety procedures, including electric fence perimeters for extended camps. Their island campsite showed clear wildlife use. Broad tracks in wet shoreline and stripped blueberry bushes indicated active foraging. Guides had reported that unstable Hudson Bay ice had forced polar bears inland earlier and longer than usual, increasing predatory investigation behavior across regional waterways. Polar bears displaced inland by late melting ice present distinct risks. These large predators, typically 600 to 900 pounds in transitional habitats, often travel long distances along lake systems and investigate campsites with persistent, food-motivated curiosity. Finch and Ferrer established camp according to protocol, erecting the electric fence around tents and clustering cooking equipment downwind. As the evening settled, Ferrer photographed the lake, while Finch prepared meals inside the fenced zone. Cooking odors traveled across calm water, carried by shifting wind. A large male polar bear detected the scent, approached from the mainland shoreline, and entered the water. Ferrer observed the bear swimming toward the island while reviewing his photos and alerted Finch, prompting immediate implementation of safety procedures. Finch activated the fence alarm, which triggered briefly but cut off where the lower wire sagged over uneven ground. The polar bear made landfall and tested the energized section of wire with a paw, retreating momentarily from the shock. After circling the perimeter, the animal located the low, slack strand and stepped through without breaking it. Finch and Ferrer deployed bear spray toward the breach point, creating a drifting chemical cloud that caused the bear to turn its head and blink repeatedly. The deterrence slowed the animal, but did not stop its advance. The bear resumed its approach once the airborne spray dispersed in the light wind. Ferrer positioned himself between Finch and the advancing bear while she activated their satellite beacon. He discharged another close-range burst of spray directly into the bear's face. The reaction was brief: head shake, recoil, and a pause before the bear re-engaged and charged decisively. The impact drove Ferrer backward onto the rocky shoreline, The bear clamped onto his upper arm and torso, inflicting deep but non-arterial lacerations before releasing him to reassess its surroundings. Finch fired a marine flare at close range. The burning projectile struck the bear's shoulder fur and caused a short disengagement, but the animal remained fixated on the campsite. The polar bear redirected toward Finch as she moved toward their overturned canoe for cover. Her barrier proved insufficient. The bear's jaws closed across her upper chest and neck, exerting crushing force consistent with predatory attack behavior, resulting in catastrophic trauma. The animal maintained pressure until Finch ceased movement. Ferrer regained partial consciousness after the bear departed the island and began swimming back toward the mainland. Using their trauma kit, he applied compression dressings to control bleeding and maintained activation of the beacon. His wounds, while extensive, had spared major vessels, allowing him to remain conscious intermittently. A rescue helicopter reached the island 4 hours later, guided by the locator signal. Ferrer was airlifted to Winnipeg in critical condition. Finch was pronounced deceased at the scene from severe crushing injuries to the thorax and neck. Investigation confirmed the bear had been previously tagged by wildlife officials and displayed human habituation patterns. Extended inland displacement due to unstable Hudson Bay ice had increased predatory investigative behavior across the region. Ferrer's account, photographs, and gear provided valuable documentation that contributed to updated safety protocols for polar bear transitional habitats. Finch's family later established a wilderness education foundation focused on northern travel safety and shifting wildlife patterns. It was July 18, 2025, and the remote waterways of a little-known mangrove delta in eastern India wound through dense forest, forming a maze of tidal channels and small islands. Morning mist clung to exposed roots, the air heavy with humidity and insect noise. The site lay outside any major tourist route, a fringe buffer where tidal channels and soft mud turned every step into a small decision. David Hendricks had spent 3 years saving for a year-long family trip. At 49, he ran a contracting business in Colorado. Maria, his wife, formerly a nurse, now taught their children at home. Their 4 children, Jessica, 19, the twins, Matthew and Michael, both 17, and Emma, 15, had been backpacking through India for 3 weeks, avoiding popular routes. A hired guide had refused to cross a marked buffer zone because of recent tiger activity. David overruled him and chose a low, tree-ringed island where the channels looked like natural barriers. Bengal tigers in mangrove terrain are adapted swimmers and move along tidal corridors. This area had a displaced adult male that recent flooding had pushed outward. He'd been using the islands as movement channels. That evening, the family set 3 tents on the island, ate packaged food, and settled under the low, humid sky. Nothing at camp suggested immediate danger, only a smell on the wind that a large predator might already be nearby. At first light, Emma stepped away from the tents to use a makeshift latrine beneath the trees. The tiger, concealed in dense cover, closed the short distance in an instant and knocked her down with a single rapid strike to the upper torso. The sound of her fall and the brief, high-pitched scream tore the campsite into motion. What followed was not a neat, staged sequence, but a chaotic scramble. Jessica, Matthew, Michael, Maria, and David stumbled out of the tents in different states, some barefoot, some still clutching sleeping bags. In the half-light, movement fanned across ankle-deep mud and a tangle of prop roots, backpacks and tent poles snagged on exposed roots. Several broken roots jutted at waist and chest height, sharp where previous tides had snapped them. Michael's foot slid into soft, suctioning mud and could not be freed at once. Where movement stopped, vulnerability followed. The tiger struck nearest targets first and moved with quick, forceful bursts rather than a choreographed pattern. He hit Jessica as she came out of her tent, a sudden, brutal collision that left her collapsing into the nylon wall. David ran blindly toward the noise, tool in hand, and drew the cat's attention. The animal latched onto David with a crushing bite to the throat that dropped him within seconds. He was motionless when he fell. The single adult male did not pause to scan or methodically pick victims. He reacted to the closest movement in the muddled clearing. Panic drove the others into the mangrove labyrinth. Michael and Maria broke away toward a narrow channel, but the terrain betrayed them. Michael's boots snagged, and he went down hard against a broken prop root. A jagged, half-submerged branch drove into his abdomen as he fell, severing vessels and trapping him awkwardly against the root mass. Maria managed a short distance farther, but collapsed near the waterline, bleeding heavily from deep claw wounds across her flank and upper torso. She dragged herself under low foliage but could not continue. Matthew tried to move towards the boat but lost footing in the soft mud and twisted, the straps of his pack catching on a root. He fought to free himself while the tiger closed again. The animal struck with a decisive, fatal bite to the upper neck. The rapidity of those final strikes left little time for coherent rescue attempts. Anyone who tried to pull a family member free was hampered by suctioning mud, tangled roots, and the need to avoid further movement that would draw the predator back. Within 7 minutes, the clearing had gone from a scattered campsite to a tableau of collapsed tents, scattered gear, and people stopped short by mud or injury. Emma lay near the initial strike site, having died where she fell. Jessica and David were found close to their tents, both fatally injured in the first moments of the attack. Matthew lay a short distance downslope, killed by the decisive neck bite delivered during the second surge. 2 others, Michael and Maria, had managed to put distance between themselves and the tents, but were located a short distance away, collapsed and mortally wounded. Michael had been impaled on a mangrove root during the scramble. Maria had bled heavily from deep lacerations and could not reach help. Coroner findings later confirmed that all 6 family members died from a combination of catastrophic trauma and rapid blood loss, consistent with a single short-duration tiger attack. Rangers closed access to the island and nearby channels for 2 days to document the site and monitor for fresh tiger sign. No man-eater indicators were found, and the animal was not located in follow-up sweeps, so authorities issued a brief advisory to guides about increased tiger movement after recent flooding. Mangrove forests hide dangers in tight, waterlogged corridors, but open bushveld carries its own risks. Even in guided settings where visibility seems clear, a single misstep near a predator's approach route can turn a quiet evening walk into a fatal encounter. It was August 3, 2015, on a privately owned section of bushveld near the Limpopo border, where a narrow walking path led toward a seasonal waterhole. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint smell of dust and dry grass as the last light began to settle over the savanna. The lodge's sunset photography walk was supposed to be routine, the kind of quiet excursion where guests captured silhouettes of grazing antelope against the fading sky. But the bush that evening held a deeper silence, a kind that marked the transition between daylight safety and nocturnal movement. Marcus Venter, a 34-year-old electrical technician from Pretoria, had joined the walk as part of a short holiday. He was known among colleagues as cautious and methodical, a man who preferred structure and tasks he could measure. Photography was new to him, something he had taken up only months earlier to cope with stress from layoffs at his workplace. The trip was meant to provide calm and a chance to build a small portfolio he hoped to submit to a local magazine. His interest leaned toward landscapes and low-light shots, and he tended to move ahead of groups to capture angles without obstruction. This was his first time on a guided safari walk. Staff recalled he asked detailed questions about framing and exposure, not about wildlife behavior. He trusted that walking with a guide meant predictable safety, as long as he stayed within sight. As the group prepared, he carried only a mid-range camera, a water bottle, and a small pack. His goal for the evening was simple: capture the smooth surface of the waterhole, reflecting dusk colors. The approach to the waterhole moved through alternating mopane patches and open grassland. Thickets of blackthorn and wait-a-bit acacia formed dense pockets near the water's edge, forcing the group to maintain a single-file line. A broad reed bed bordered the far side of the waterhole, a favored resting and hunting corridor for predators. The sun had nearly fallen fully behind the horizon, creating a low contrast that made reeds, shadows, and contours blend into one another. Lions frequenting this region often traveled these reed corridors at dusk. Mature males could weigh more than 400 pounds and were capable of closing short distances at speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour. In dense cover, their approach could be nearly silent until the final seconds. Lions in this region commonly used direct escape paths and sometimes reacted aggressively when movement blocked those routes. Guides in the area routinely reminded visitors that waterholes were transitional sites where visibility narrowed quickly. There had been earlier signs the group registered only partially. The guide observed fresh tracks near the mud line, a large male, prints still sharp at the edges. Broken reeds indicated recent movement toward the thicket. A distant contact call from across the river carried faintly, suggesting a pride nearby. The guide motioned for slower pacing and kept the guests tight on the path. Marcus drifted 4 to 5 yards ahead to frame a low, wide shot of the water's reflection. In doing so, he placed himself near a narrow gap between the reeds and the bank, one of the few direct crossing points lions used. The moment of contact developed with almost no warning. Witnesses reported a single rustle within the reeds, followed by a deep, fast-moving shape pushing through the cover. Evidence at the scene later showed the lion closed a distance of roughly 25 to 35 feet in a straight, explosive burst. Marcus, crouched and facing the water, had little awareness of the approach. The lion hit him with enough force to drive him backward into the hardened earth, knocking his camera several feet from the point of impact. The guide raised his arm and moved the remaining guests upslope as the brush around the bank erupted with movement. Ground markings indicated the lion pinned Marcus with its forelimbs, pressing its weight onto his torso, while it delivered several deep bites to the shoulder and neck area. These patterns matched defensive close-range attacks, documented in similar environments. Witnesses described the attack as brief but violent, the brush shaking in bursts rather than continuous motion. Marcus attempted to rise once, shifting the disturbance into a shallow arc along the bank. But the lion brought him down again almost immediately. The attack ceased as abruptly as it began. The lion withdrew into the reeds without circling or returning, leaving the bank still except for settling dust and the sound of disturbed water. The guide kept the remaining guests in place on higher ground, conducting a controlled retreat once the path behind them was confirmed clear. A retrieval team reached the site that night. Flattened grass, compacted soil, and parallel scrape marks aligned with a brief struggle. Marcus's camera lay 8 feet away, coated in mud with cracked internal components. He was declared dead at the lodge perimeter. Rangers later confirmed a known male lion, prompting a temporary suspension of sunset walks near reed-lined banks. Big cats rely on speed and distance, but in dense rainforests the threats are different. Sometimes an attack begins not with a charge from afar, but with a sudden movement only a few feet away, where a single step off the trail can place someone directly in a foraging animal's path. It was May 12, 2017, and a remote buffer zone rainforest north of Sumatra stretched for miles, a tangle of steep ridges, unmanaged hardwood stands, and narrow walking paths used by local guides who led small photography groups. Morning humidity hung heavy. Hornbills and gibbons called through the canopy, while the understory smelled of damp earth and rotting wood. Pockets of sunlight pierced the leaves in thin shafts, making the trail's dark, wet patches stand out like fingerprints. The group that morning was compact. 4 people on a photography trek run by a small eco-operator. Lead guide Rafi Iskandar, 37 and born in a nearby village, knew every skid track and rotten log on the route. He walked with a measured rhythm, scanning the understory and whispering quiet instructions. Stay within sight, keep lenses capped until steady, and never sit with your back to dense tangles. Evan Clark, a mid-30s nature photographer from the UK, favored low angles and close macro shots. He moved ahead on the left shoulder of the trail to frame textures and patterns that would read large in print. 2 other guests trailed a few yards back, adjusting lenses and trading soft observations about a distant hornbill. Trail signs suggested recent animal activity, shallow, round footprints in the soft soil near fallen logs, and fresh claw scrapes on low trunks. Rafi noted these as routine, rooting and foraging after recent rain, but he also marked a rotten ironwood down a short slope where the undergrowth layered thickly. Rotten logs hold insects and fruit, and in this corridor they were known for attracting foragers. Rafi paused at a narrow bend and reminded the group to maintain spacing near dense deadwood areas, demonstrating the limited visibility by tapping the leaf litter with his boot. Evan lingered at the left margin to work the texture of a decaying log. He crouched, then eased backward until his shoulders rested against the ironwood's buttress, an instinctive move to steady the long lens. The camera's shuttering was a soft, patterned noise amid the forest hum. Rafi and the others paused a few yards behind, their silhouettes half hidden by rattan and young bamboo. In that exact geometry, the photographer with his back to dense cover, the guide slightly upslope, guests nearby, the forest's escape routes narrowed to a human scale. What followed unfolded in a handful of heartbeats. Rafi later described the moment as a brief, heavy stillness, one of those pauses in the forest that signal movement before it happens. The shuttering stopped, and in that short pause, a sun bear that had been foraging inside the rotten log slipped into a narrow corridor. It used to move between feeding spots. The animal's path was blocked by Evan's position, the photographer's back, and the slope together created a line the bear could not cross without confronting a human. Raffi shouted a warning, but the bear closed the few yards separating them almost instantaneously. An explosive, straight burst rather than an extended chase. Witness timing and ground evidence indicate the animal covered roughly 10 to 15 feet in under a second. Impact knocked Evan sideways on the uneven slope. The leaf litter and loose humus shifted under their combined weight. The bear used its forelimbs and body weight to pin him, pressing him into the ground while delivering targeted bites aimed at the upper torso and neck. Locations consistent with an animal trying to disable a threat quickly rather than dismember. Raffi and one guest moved in immediately, creating noise and throwing packs and sticks to distract the animal. The bear broke contact after only a short period and withdrew into the tangle's downslope. It did not circle or pursue the group. Physical traces matched these actions: flattened leaf litter beside the log, parallel forelimb scrapes where the animal pinned the victim, and a short track of disturbed understory leading down the slope where it exited. Evan's camera and a strap were scattered several feet from the impact zone. Camera housing smeared with mud and abrasions consistent with a fall against roots and compacted litter. The mechanics matched what is known from similar close-range incidents. A sun bear startled at close range in dense cover typically responds with a rapid, defensive burst. If its escape path is blocked by a human's back or slope geometry, it can resort to pinning and targeted biting. The short distance, the immediacy of contact, the lack of prolonged pursuit, and the pattern of injuries, puncture and tearing wounds to the upper shoulder and neck, with blunt trauma from a fall onto exposed roots, are all consistent with such an encounter. Radio logs show Raffi moved a short distance upslope to get a signal, while an assistant applied improvised pressure. These movements explain the timing of the call and the subsequent 3-hour rescue window given the steep, muddy terrain and need to assemble trained personnel. Rangers reached the group several hours later. Their brief documentation matched the on-scene report. Scuffed soil beside the rotten log, a short drag and disturbance where the struggle occurred, and small, round tracks leading downslope. Evan was pronounced dead at the staging point on the forest edge. Rangers concluded the attack was defensive, triggered when a foraging sun bear's escape route was unknowingly blocked, and issued a temporary advisory for guides moving through narrow, overgrown sections of the corridor. Floodwater can shift predators into places they're not usually seen, turning calm channels into unpredictable hunting zones. It was September 22, 2014. And the monsoon season had reshaped the lowland buffer zone forests south of Nepal's protected areas into a network of swollen rivers and submerged grasslands. What was usually a narrow, winding creek used for short wildlife viewing excursions had expanded into a broad, slow-moving channel that wound between reeds, flooded salt groves, and scattered high-ground islands. Local guides had been adjusting their routes daily as the water continued to rise, trying to maintain access to the seasonal canoe safaris that drew visitors each year. Ramesh Thapa, a 41-year-old river guide from a nearby village, had worked these channels for more than a decade. His job was straightforward: paddle tourists along the quieter edges of the waterways and point out birds, deer, and other wildlife that gathered near the creek. The monsoon made the work unpredictable, but it also brought opportunities. With roads flooded and foot trails washed out, canoe excursions became one of the few remaining activities for visitors staying in the region's eco-lodges. That morning, Ramesh led 2 tourists, an Australian couple, into a section of the buffer zone forest normally accessible only during the driest months. The recent flooding had pushed the water several feet above the usual tree line, creating new routes through stands of reeds and over submerged grass beds. Branches floated past them in steady intervals, and the sound of distant runoff cascaded from higher ground. The tourists sat at the center of the narrow wooden boat, while Ramesh guided from the rear, using a long bamboo pole to push them quietly through the channel. The water was brown and murky from recent rains, carrying sediment from upstream. Birds moved between the exposed branches above the waterline. Occasionally, Ramesh stopped the canoe so the couple could take photographs of herons hunting along the edges of the flooded brush. Mugger crocodiles are common in Nepal's southern waters, especially during the monsoon when high water levels expand their range into agricultural fields and buffer forests. Adults typically measure 7 to 10 feet and are strong ambush predators, using flooded vegetation for concealment. During heavy rains, they often shift to newly formed channels where fish, small mammals, and carrion are pushed by the current. In the rising floodwater, the boundaries between human routes and crocodile hunting zones had blurred. The creek Ramesh was navigating had recently merged with a deeper pool farther upstream, creating a cross-current that made visibility beneath the surface nearly impossible. As the canoe approached a tight bend bordered by tall reeds, the water ahead appeared calm. Ramesh slowed the boat, bracing his pole against a submerged branch to let the tourists photograph a group of storks perched on an exposed root system. With the surface still and silent, none of them noticed the faint disturbance near the reed line, several yards to their left. The mugger crocodile surfaced in a low, quiet rise near the reed line before accelerating toward the canoe. Its head broke the water in a smooth, upward rise, and within seconds the animal closed the distance to the canoe. The boat rocked sharply as the crocodile struck the side, its weight forcing the hull downward. Ramesh shifted his stance to stabilize the canoe, but the sudden tilt sent one of the tourists sliding toward the edge. Ramesh moved forward quickly to pull him back, and the movement placed him closer to the waterline. The crocodile surged again, this time reaching the exposed area where Ramesh had crouched. In a single upward motion, it clamped onto his forearm and pulled him off balance. The canoe rocked violently as the tourists grabbed the sides to keep from falling in. Ramesh entered the water within seconds, pulled downward by the crocodile's weight. The current and limited visibility made it impossible for him to regain footing. Underwater, the crocodile executed a short, forceful twist, just enough to subdue him, stirring the sediment into a dense cloud around them. The motion displaced reeds and stirred the silt around them, creating a muddy plume that spread across the surface. The tourists, unable to see below, could only watch the water churn before the movement gradually slowed. The crocodile released Ramesh once there was no further movement from its grasp, disappearing into the deeper channel that branched off towards the forest interior. The canoe drifted several meters downstream until the couple regained control using Ramesh's pole. They signaled for help by shouting toward a cluster of houses on higher ground, where villagers quickly organized a search. Heavy floodwater made recovery efforts difficult. By late afternoon, teams were still unable to trace the exact route the crocodile had taken through the branching channels. The search continued over the next several days as the water gradually receded, revealing more of the submerged banks. A week later, villagers found Ramesh's body caught against a natural debris barrier where the creek narrowed around a cluster of tree trunks. The immediate area showed signs of water disturbance and drag marks consistent with flood-fed currents. Tracks from a large mugger crocodile were later documented along a nearby exposed sand patch once the water drained back to normal levels. The incident led to temporary closure of canoe routes in the flooded sections of the buffer zone and renewed warnings about conducting wildlife viewing excursions during periods of rapidly rising water. And on dry ground, danger can sit silent just a few feet off the trail, hidden until someone steps too close. It was November 8, 2013, and a low band of mist held to a forest corridor west of Cougar village, where a narrow walking path cut through secondary jungle and young bamboo. The area sat outside any formal reserve, a community-used woodland where local guides led short jungle treks for visitors. Overnight rain left the trail soft and dark, with water beading along rattan vines and dripping steadily from the canopy. Thomas Reed, a solo traveler in his mid-30s and a photographer on a month-long trip through Sumatra, has requested a 2-hour walking safari aimed at birds and forest textures rather than large mammals. The guide assigned to accompany him, Adi Santoso, a 41-year-old villager with years of experience on the same loop, signed out a basic first aid kit and radio before they left. The plan was to follow the ridge above a small stream and return by late morning. Conditions favored wildlife movement. Recent rain had softened the ground and brought fallen fruit to the surface. Forest officers later noted fresh rooting patches along the corridor edges, typical signs of wild boar feeding after storms. Wild boars in Southeast Asian forests often rest in shallow ground depressions during the day, especially after rain. When surprised at close range, they respond with an explosive, straight-line burst meant to clear a threat rather than pursue it. Adi reported hearing occasional rustles in the understory as they walked, nothing unusual for that route. Footprints photographed afterward showed a steady pace, with periodic stops at clearings where Thomas took close shots of lichens and bark. Addie's statement indicates they paused near a narrow bend, where the path squeezed between shoulder-high vegetation on the right and a shallow drop toward saplings on the left. From that position, visibility into the thicket was only a few feet. The sequence that followed lasted seconds. According to Addie, a brief movement sounded off the right side. One or two quick rustles followed by stillness. Thomas took 2 short steps off the trail toward a fallen branch to frame a close shot. At that moment, the vegetation erupted. Investigators later documented a shallow, oval depression inside the thicket, consistent with a resting animal, and a straight line of disturbed stems leading to the trail. Addie raised an arm and shouted for Thomas to stop, but the charge had already started. Soil displacement marks and parallel hoof impressions showed a direct burst from cover across a distance of roughly 12 to 13 feet. The boar struck Thomas at the edge of the path. Impact scuffs and a drag arc in the damp soil indicated he fell backward and slid along the surface before coming to rest against exposed roots. Addie reported one sharp swing from the animal's head during the rush, consistent with the tusk injury later documented by medical staff. The boar did not linger. Tracks and broken brush on the opposite side of the trail traced a rapid exit downslope. There were no signs of circling or pursuit, only a continuous line of hoof prints fading into leaf litter. Addie remained with Thomas, attempted compression using wraps from the first aid kit, and radioed for help. Radio traffic logs note intermittent signal loss along the ridge. Contact was re-established when Addie moved a short distance upslope to a higher point and returned. Villagers reached the site approximately 40 minutes after the initial call. Addie had already moved Thomas a short distance upslope, but he remained unresponsive when responders arrived. Forest officers documented the scene later that afternoon. A flattened rest spot within the thicket, a straight 13-foot charge path, impact marks at the trail edge, and a shallow blood pool where Thomas fell. A walking stick and lens cap were found near the disturbed stems, and the camera body, displaced about 10 to 12 feet, showed a cracked housing from hitting the roots. Measurements at the site indicated hoof widths and stride consistent with an adult male wild boar. Officers also noted fresh rooting pits within 50 meters of the trail. All indicators pointed to a close-range startle and a single crossing burst, with no sign of prolonged animal presence. Recovery proceeded by stretcher along the outbound loop. Light rain returned as the group moved, softening track edges. Villagers cut back rattan to widen a turn and flagged the route for follow-up documentation. Local authorities later reviewed the incident with guides, recommending tighter spacing on narrow segments, voice cues near dense thickets, and keeping guests centered on the trail. By late afternoon, the corridor quieted. The disturbed stems sagged slightly, and a faint breeze moved the mist downslope, leaving the trail still. Thomas Reed was declared dead at the scene. Medical review confirmed a single penetrating tusk wound to the torso, delivered during the boar's initial impact, with rapid blood loss as the cause of death. The loop trail was closed for 2 days for documentation, and the incident was classified as a startle-triggered boar encounter following heavy rain. It was March 15, 2018, at Wildwood Private Zoo in the remote hills of Montana, where the crisp mountain air carried the scent of pine and distant sounds of captive wildlife. The facility operated as a roadside attraction, offering close-up animal photos to small content creators and tourists, often accepting clients who were simply willing to pay the fee, regardless of their experience or online reach. The zoo's main attraction was an adult male grizzly bear kept in a simple steel bar enclosure designed more for viewing than containment. Although surrounded by wooded hills, the facility sat roughly 15 minutes from the nearest small town, which allowed first responders to reach it without significant delay. 25-year-old Thea Carmichael had driven 12 hours from Los Angeles, drawn by viral photos of another small creator posing with the same bear. With only a few thousand Instagram followers, Thea was still trying to grow her adventure page, which pushed her to attempt increasingly risky content to stand out. Her feed already showed cliff jumps, open water swims with sharks, and close encounters with dangerous wildlife, each one meant to make her look bolder than her modest following suggested. Marcus Webb, 52-year-old zoo owner and former circus trainer, had agreed to Thea's request for an exclusive photo shoot. Despite staff concerns, Webb prioritized profit over safety protocols, often bending rules for high-paying clients. Jake Morrison, a 28-year-old freelance photographer photographer desperate for work, had been hired despite his limited wildlife photography experience. Kodiak, the zoo's 600-pound adult male grizzly, had already been showing signs of agitation that morning. He paced the length of his enclosure in slow, deliberate passes, huffing and lifting his head toward the scent of fresh meat being prepared in the adjacent feed room. The facility had no formal accreditation and was known locally for offering close-up encounters that larger institutions refused to allow, a reputation that often led staff to operate without the safeguards used in regulated parks. Staff recognized Kodiak's behavior as typical pre-feeding restlessness, and the facility's handler insisted on keeping the protective barrier in place. Webb dismissed the warning, arguing that the bear was accustomed to people and that the photo shoot needed an unobstructed view. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable predators, capable of running 35 miles per hour and possessing bite forces exceeding 1,200 pounds per square inch. Adult males can weigh up to 800 pounds, with massive claws measuring up to 4 inches long. Despite Kodiak's captive upbringing, his wild instincts remained intact, particularly when territorial boundaries were challenged. The fatal sequence began when Thea entered the enclosure through an open gate, positioning herself just 8 feet from the massive predator. Webb stood nearby with a tranquilizer gun, believing he could intervene if necessary. Thea raised her arm for a selfie pose, inadvertently triggering Kodiak's predatory response through her sudden movement and direct eye contact. According to witness statements, Kodiak moved toward Thea rapidly. Staff reported seeing the bear make contact with her, knocking her to the ground. Morrison later told investigators he heard Thea scream briefly before the sound stopped. Webb fired a tranquilizer dart, but it had no immediate effect. The bear continued the attack, unaffected by the sedative. Witnesses later told investigators they saw Kodiak pin her with his forelimbs and deliver multiple paw strikes to her head and upper body. Staff reported hearing the bear clamp onto her shoulder and upper torso, several short, forceful bites, a behavior consistent with territorial mauling rather than predation. In the final moments of the struggle, Bear dragged her a short distance before settling over her, shielding the view of what happened next. Staff members shouted and banged on the enclosure barriers in an attempt to distract Kodiak. Bear remained focused on Thea for what witnesses estimated as several minutes. Webb considered entering the enclosure, but was restrained by other staff members who feared for his safety. Staff noise eventually caused Kodiak to disengage and move to the far corner of the enclosure. Only several minutes later did the tranquilizer begin to slow him. When staff could safely approach, they found Thea unresponsive with severe injuries. No vital signs were detected. Emergency responders arrived within 20 minutes, but could only pronounce Thea dead at the scene. The subsequent autopsy revealed the full extent of her injuries: multiple skull fractures, cervical spine damage, and extensive trauma to her head and torso. The medical examiner determined that death resulted from massive head trauma and associated complications. Authorities opened an investigation into the zoo's safety practices, noting that the photo shoot had been arranged without adequate barriers or emergency planning. The facility was shut down while legal proceedings moved forward, and the bear was transferred to a secure wildlife center. Webb later faced multiple negligence-related charges tied to the unsafe setup he approved. Morrison, who had been positioned just outside the enclosure and had witnessed the attack at close range, struggled to return to work afterward. For Thea's family, the incident became a stark reminder of how dangerous staged wildlife encounters can be. Her earlier posts about the planned photo shoot were later used by investigators to verify when she arrived and how the session had been arranged. The case concluded with a finding that the decision to place her inside the enclosure without safeguards directly led to the fatal outcome. While Thea's story ended in a controlled environment, other thrill seekers continue pushing boundaries in remote locations. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, where ancient predators rule their territories, another individual would soon discover that some boundaries should never be crossed, especially when facing a creature whose amber eyes had been watching from the shadows. It was August 7th, 2017, deep within a remote section of the Brazilian Amazon rainforest, where dense canopy blocked sunlight from reaching the forest floor. The protected territory harbored countless species of wildlife, including some of South America's most dangerous predators. Narrow game trails wound through thick vegetation, connecting water sources that attracted both prey animals and apex predators. 38-year-old Graham Kincaid had illegally entered this protected territory to capture exotic animals for the black market. A professional poacher from Texas, Angeles. Graham possessed years of experience trapping dangerous wildlife. His clientele included wealthy collectors willing to pay enormous sums for rare specimens. Carlos Mendez, a 45-year-old local guide, had reluctantly agreed to lead Graham deeper into the reserve, despite knowing the dangers. Carlos desperately needed money for his daughter's medical treatment, forcing him to accept this illegal job. The experienced guide recognized fresh signs of jaguar activity, but found his warnings consistently dismissed by Graham. Their destination was a remote area where wildlife researchers had recently documented an unusually large male jaguar. Graham had obtained this information through illegal channels, specifically targeting this location because of reports describing the massive cat. Graham established his base camp directly on a narrow game trail beside a tributary river, ignoring Carlos's urgent warnings about numerous jaguar signs surrounding the area. Fresh paw prints pressed into muddy earth, deep claw marks scored into tree bark, and the unmistakable musky scent of territorial markings filled the immediate vicinity. Carlos departed that evening, planning to return the following day to guide Graham back to civilization. Jaguars are the America's largest cats, with adult males weighing up to 250 pounds. These apex predators possess the strongest bite force of any big cat, capable of crushing turtle shells and caiman skulls. Unlike other large cats that suffocate their prey, jaguars kill by delivering devastating bites directly to the skull or neck, their powerful jaws designed to penetrate bone. When Carlos returned to the campsite the next morning as planned, he discovered a blood-soaked scene. Graham's equipment lay scattered across the area, with clear signs of a violent struggle. A distinct blood trail and disturbed vegetation led from the campsite deeper into the forest. Carlos immediately contacted Brazilian environmental authorities using his satellite phone. Investigators reconstructed the attack based on physical evidence at the scene. Multiple sets of large cat tracks indicated a jaguar estimated at 200 to 230 pounds had moved around the perimeter of the camp. Scratch marks on trees and disturbed undergrowth suggested the animal had approached from several directions before the encounter. The pattern of blood spatter, overturned equipment, and Graham's final position indicated he had been facing away from his attacker when struck. Investigators concluded the initial contact occurred near the center of the camp based on the concentration of blood evidence in scattered gear. Graham's crossbow was found approximately 10 feet from the main blood pool, with a bolt still loaded. Investigators determined he had chosen this weapon for its silence when avoiding park patrols, a common practice among poachers operating in protected areas. The weapon's position suggested Graham had detected a threat, but was unable to respond effectively. Forensic examination of the continuous blood trail, broken vegetation, and matching paw prints led authorities approximately 160 feet into the forest, where they recovered Graham's remains. The body showed evidence of predation consistent with jaguar attack patterns, including severe trauma to the neck and head region. Deep puncture wounds indicated the jaguar's powerful canine teeth had penetrated the skull, while claw marks across the torso revealed the animal's overwhelming physical dominance during the fatal encounter. The jaguar responsible was later identified through camera trap footage as a male estimated at 200 to 230 pounds on the large side for the region. Tracking data and photographic evidence documented the animal's continued presence in its territory following the incident. Wildlife biologists studying the footage noted the jaguar's distinctive rosette patterns and scarred left ear, likely from territorial disputes with other males competing for prime hunting grounds in the increasingly fragmented habitat. Brazilian environmental police used the case to highlight ongoing challenges with illegal wildlife trafficking in the Amazon region. Graham's family in Texas received notification of his death, though authorities provided limited details about the circumstances due to the ongoing investigation into his illegal activities. The incident served as a stark reminder of nature's unforgiving response to those who violate its protected sanctuaries. But danger doesn't always hide in thick forests or remote borders. Sometimes it surfaces in places people visit every day, especially when the wrong decisions collide with the wrong conditions. It was June 22, 2016, along an unpatrolled stretch of northeastern Brazil's coastline, where the Atlantic Ocean met a less regulated section of beach several miles north of Recife. The area stretched for miles along the Brazilian coast, bordered by palm trees and small beachside establishments that attracted backpackers and budget travelers. Few warning signs marked this remote shoreline, despite despite the known dangers of swimming after dark when predators moved closer to shore. 31-year-old Ronan Mercer had arrived in the region 3 days earlier as part of his South American backpacking adventure. A British traveler from Manchester, Ronan documented extreme activities across multiple continents on his travel blog. Witnesses later reported he had ignored multiple safety warnings from locals. Miguel Santos, the 29-year-old bartender at a small beachside bar, had served Ronan 8 caipirinhas throughout the evening. The establishment operated with minimal oversight, typical of remote coastal areas where alcohol service regulations were rarely enforced. Earlier that day, Isabella Costa, a local who worked part-time as a beach guide, had warned Ronan about the dangers of night swimming after observing his behavior around the water. The area was particularly dangerous due to its proximity to a river mouth, where fresh water mixed with salt water, creating murky conditions that attracted both fish and predators. Recent heavy rainfall had further reduced underwater visibility while concentrating marine life in shallow coastal areas. Local fishermen had reported several aggressive shark encounters in recent weeks. Bull sharks are among the ocean's most dangerous predators, responsible for more attacks on humans than any other shark species except great whites. These powerful hunters can grow up to 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds, with muscular bodies designed for explosive bursts of speed. Unlike most sharks that prefer deeper waters, bull sharks frequently hunt in shallow coastal areas and river mouths where prey congregates. Around midnight, witnesses observed Ronan leaving the bar and entering the ocean despite his intoxicated state. Security footage from a nearby establishment showed him wading into the water during high tide. Recent rainfall had reduced underwater visibility to less than 3 feet. Investigators later reviewed the footage frame by frame and noted that Ronan moved steadily into deeper water until the camera lost visibility in the darkness. A pair of backpackers walking along the shoreline around the same time reported hearing a sudden splash, followed by silence, though heavy surf made it impossible to determine the source. Tidal analysis showed that currents in the area were strong enough to pull an impaired swimmer slightly north along the shoreline within minutes. These combined observations suggested Ronan remained in the water for only a short period before the attack occurred. At dawn, a local fisherman discovered remains washed ashore and immediately contacted authorities. The condition and location of the remains indicated the victim had been attacked approximately 50 yards from shore based on tidal drift patterns. Investigators reconstructed the attack based on physical evidence and expert analysis. Marine biologists examining the bite patterns determined they were consistent with a large bull shark, estimated at 8 to 10 feet in length, based on jaw spacing measurements. The distribution of injuries suggested an ambush-style attack from below, typical of bull shark hunting behavior in murky water conditions. Forensic analysis indicated the attack occurred in shallow water during peak hunting hours for the species. The victim's blood alcohol content, measured at 0.18%, would have significantly impaired swimming ability and situational awareness. Marine experts noted that erratic movements by intoxicated swimmers often trigger predatory responses in sharks. Local police opened a small-scale investigation due to limited resources in the remote area. Marine biologists reviewed recent shark activity, while British consular services notified Ronan's family. Authorities added warning signs along the coastline. Isabella Costa confirmed she had warned Ronan, and Miguel Santos was questioned about alcohol service before his work was temporarily restricted. The beachside establishment implemented new policies requiring staff to refuse service to heavily intoxicated customers planning water activities. Marine researchers used the incident data to advocate for increased shark monitoring programs along Brazil's northeastern coast. The tragedy highlighted the dangerous combination of alcohol consumption and unregulated coastal tourism in remote areas where emergency response capabilities remained severely limited. The bull shark responsible for the attack was never located. Marine biologists concluded the animal likely moved to other hunting grounds along the coast, following normal territorial patterns for the species. Environmental factors, including water temperature and prey availability, suggested the shark would continue hunting in similar coastal environments throughout the region. The case remains a sobering reminder of oceanic predators' unpredictable nature. And while the ocean can turn deadly in seconds, even trained researchers face life-threatening risks when they move into the territory of powerful animals that don't tolerate mistakes. It was October 14, 2015, at a remote research site in the forests of western Tanzania, where dense woodland stretched along the eastern shores of Lake Tanganyika. The area covered rugged terrain filled with steep valleys and thick vegetation. During mating season, territorial tensions between rival chimpanzee communities reached dangerous levels. 29-year-old Lila Monroe had arrived at the research station 3 weeks earlier to conduct behavioral research on aggressive chimpanzee troops for her doctoral thesis at a major American university. An ambitious primatologist, Lila had specifically chosen to study the area's most notorious troop, known for their violent territorial behavior. Joseph Mwanga, a 41-year-old experienced local guide, had worked with researchers for 15 years and understood chimpanzee behavior intimately. Joseph had warned Lila about the dangers of approaching the aggressive troop alone, particularly during mating season when testosterone levels peaked among males. Her research supervisor had established strict safety protocols requiring team observations for all fieldwork in boundary zones. The area where Lila planned to observe was a disputed boundary zone between two rival chimpanzee communities, making it extremely volatile. A local scout had reported unusual displays of aggression the previous week, including rock throwing and violent charging behaviors. Chimpanzees are humanity's closest living relatives, sharing 98.8% of human DNA, but they possess physical capabilities far exceeding those of humans. Adult males can weigh up to 130 pounds and stand 4 feet tall, with arm strength several times greater than humans. Their large canine teeth, measuring up to 2 inches long, are designed for both display and combat. During territorial disputes or mating season, male chimpanzees become extremely aggressive. Lila had signed out for a routine observation window that morning, logging her destination in the boundary zone as required by station protocol. She was expected to check in by early afternoon, but no further GPS movement was recorded after her initial entry into the disputed area. When she missed her scheduled return time, staff initiated standard search procedures. Joseph discovered Lila's body several hours after she failed to return to the research station at the scheduled time. Following her last known GPS coordinates from her tracking device, he located the site approximately 650 feet from the established observation point in a small clearing near the boundary zone. Investigators reconstructed the incident based on physical evidence at the scene. Lila's notebook, pen, and binoculars were found scattered across an area spanning approximately 30 feet. Her body was located near a fallen log at the far edge of this debris field. Footprint analysis revealed human tracks leading to a position at the clearing's edge, approximately 30 feet from where chimpanzee tracks were concentrated. Forensic examination revealed severe trauma consistent with chimpanzee attack patterns documented in scientific literature. The distribution and nature of injuries indicated an encounter with an adult male chimpanzee based on bite mark measurements and force patterns. Scene analysis showed disturbed vegetation and ground markings consistent with significant physical struggle. Lila's recovered research notes contained entries documenting chimpanzee territorial behaviors, but investigators could not determine the exact sequence of events leading to the attack. Her final written observations were recorded approximately 1 hour before her scheduled return time. The notes indicated she had observed unusual agitation among the male chimpanzees, with repeated displays of dominance behavior and territorial vocalizations that should have served as clear warning signs. The evidence indicated Lila had violated established safety protocols by conducting solo observations in a designated high-risk boundary zone without authorization. University guidelines required a minimum 100-foot distance and 2-person teams for all observations in territorial dispute areas. Local wildlife authorities launched an investigation focusing on protocol compliance and safety procedures. The research station temporarily suspended all independent field activities pending a comprehensive safety review. Lila's family in the United States received notification through university channels. The university conducted an internal investigation into the circumstances surrounding the unauthorized solo observation. Authorities expanded buffer zones around aggressive chimp territories and enforced stricter access rules. Researchers were required to use GPS tracking, emergency devices, and 2-person teams. The station added mandatory check-ins, and the university introduced new safety training and revised high-risk fieldwork approvals using data from the incident. But you don't need to be a scientist pushing into a boundary zone to end up in danger. Even a simple day of fishing can turn fatal when warnings are ignored, and a predator is already watching. It was September 3rd, 2019, in a remote swamp region of southern Florida, where vast wetlands spread across cypress stands and winding waterways. Recent drought had forced fish and alligators into shrinking pools, creating volatile hunting grounds for large males guarding limited territory. The heat that week had further lowered water levels, tightening predator territories even more there. 44-year-old Forrest Wells had driven down from Georgia with his longtime fishing partner, John Peterson, 59. The two had fished together for decades, but this trip was Forrest's idea. Recently divorced and restless, he pushed hard to visit a secluded pool rumored to hold trophy base. John tried to steer him elsewhere after locals warned about a large, aggressive alligator, but Forrest brushed it off. Buck, the 67-year-old bait shop owner, warned them again. Several anglers had reported close calls with a big male patrolling the same pool. Wildlife officials had even posted new warning signs noting heightened aggression during drought conditions. John read the signs carefully. Forrest barely looked at them. The pool they reached that afternoon was quiet and enclosed by cypress roots and dense vegetation. Slide marks cut through the mud, and torn fish carcasses floated near the bank. The musky odor of alligator musk hung thick in the humid air. John hesitated immediately, but Forrest moved straight towards the water, convinced he could handle anything. John made one last attempt to convince Forrest to stay on the bank, reminding him that drought often pushed large males into shallow water and made their movements unpredictable. He pointed out the floating carcasses and the heavy musk scent over the pool, warning that these were unmistakable signs of recent predatory activity. Forrest brushed off the warning with a dismissive grin, acting as though a large alligator was nothing serious. John later told investigators that he sensed something was wrong. American alligators can remain motionless for long periods before launching explosive ambushes. Adult males can exceed 12 feet and weigh hundreds of pounds, with jaws capable of crushing bone. During drought, competition intensifies, and dominant males guard shrinking water bodies aggressively. John stayed on the bank while Forrest waded into the pool. Forrest moved about 40 feet out until the water reached his waist, casting towards the deeper center. John urged him to return, pointing to faint ripples moving against the wind. Forrest waved him off. Minutes later, John heard a low, heavy splash, distinct from a fish strike. He looked up and saw a broad wake pushing fast toward Forrest from the opposite bank. Forrest paused mid-cast just as the alligator's head broke the surface, its snout angled directly toward him. John yelled for him to move back, but Forrest seemed frozen for a second, confused by the sudden disturbance. The alligator surged the final few feet with a burst of speed, lifting half its body out of the water as it struck Forrest from the side. The hit knocked him off balance, and John saw Forrest's arms flail as the jaws clamped around his torso. The force folded him sideways and dragged him beneath the surface in one violent motion. John ran along the shoreline, shouting for him to swim toward the bank. Forrest broke the surface once, gasping and thrashing with only his shoulders visible. The alligator immediately rolled, dragging him under again. John described seeing a swirl of mud and bubbles rising before the water went still. For a brief moment, John scanned the pool for any sign of movement, an arm, bubbles, anything. But the surface settled into complete silence, except for widening ripples. He moved farther down the bank, calling Forrest's name and watching the water for another resurfacing, but nothing broke the surface. Several seconds stretched into minutes, confirming the alligator had dragged Forrest into deeper water beyond John's view. John sprinted back down the trail for help, reaching other anglers near the parking area, who immediately contacted authorities. Search crews arrived before sunset, but found no sign of Forrest. With deep water and near zero visibility, officials suspended the effort until daylight. Divers recovered Forrest's body the next morning, wedged beneath a submerged log. The positioning matched classic alligator caching behavior, where prey is held underwater for later feeding. The body showed severe trauma, along with signs of drowning. Bite measurements indicated an attack by a large adult male. Officials confirmed that warning signs were properly posted, but noted the remoteness of the location made monitoring difficult. John provided a full account, explaining that Forrest had ignored repeated warnings and waded far deeper than recommended. Authorities later captured the alligator using baited hooks. The animal measured 12 feet long and weighed roughly 800 pounds because it had been confirmed in a fatal attack and showed signs of human conditioning. Old fishing hooks embedded in its jaw. It was euthanized in accordance with state wildlife protocols. Biologists later examined the carcass to document behavioral indicators linked to repeated human contact. attacked. Forrest's family in Georgia received notification through state officials, and his ex-wife issued a brief acknowledgement of the circumstances. Wildlife authorities increased patrols and added more warning signs in drought-affected areas, while new rules required fishing guides to carry emergency communication gear and complete alligator safety training. The pool was closed to public access. For John, the attack remained a stark reminder of the dangers hidden in Florida's wetlands. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.